On this episode of the Soul Twin Stars podcast.
The devil never made sense to me, even though, we were told, if you masturbate, you're going to go blind. Like, oh my God, I'm going to wake up blind tomorrow.
It's inexperience. You just have no idea what parenting's going to be like until you're there.
2017 was probably the last time I had any kind of Father's Day action as well. In a traditional, normal sense.
It's a mystery. And the priest goes, it's a mystery you believe in.
We're all in this together, trying to figure out life and move on and develop ourselves spiritually.
It was kind of a Jerry Springer story, actually.
Hi, I'm Lady Shadowe, a witch with much to share, stirring the cauldron with magical self-care.
Hi, I'm Peaceful Nick, a medium divine. I chat with the dead and interpret every sign.
We are Soul Twin Stars, best friends through it all.
From spells to healing, we're answering the call.
From moon cycles to menopause and making peace with the dead.
We aren't afraid to talk about what's rarely said.
So tune in each week to get raw, real, and wise.
Let's talk about a spiritual life with absolutely no disguise. Welcome to the Soul Twin Stars podcast, Uninhibited Spirituality. Peaceful Nick and Lady Shadowe here, and first and foremost, we would like to thank our sponsors for this episode. Thank you to Nadine Gordon-Taylor, intuitive artist, author, speaker, and teacher. She's also the visionary creator behind a series of soul-stirring oracle decks, including the Animal Love Oracle cards, the Heart Path Oracle, the Crystal Clear Oracle deck, and the highly anticipated Plant Spirits Oracle, arriving this fall of 2025. Her work blends mystical insight with artistic mastery, offering tools that inspire deep connection and inner wisdom. Explore Nadine's full collection at thethirdEyestudio.com or experience her magic in person at her beautiful Peekskill, New York storefront, The Third Eye Studio. To purchase her oracle decks, visit innertraditions.com. Thank you, Beans and Buttercream Bakery. Delicious homemade treats shipped anywhere. Call 417-973-2352. Also, Abernathy Photography, based in southwestern Kentucky, a professional and stellar company providing drone photography and destination weddings. Visit abernathyphotography.com. And author Mary Ray's self-reflection workbook on conquering shame and guilt. Tell the Devil to Go to Hell. Get it now on Amazon. And craving delicious Italian cuisine? You can find it right here in Westchester County, New York, at Fino Restaurant at 1 Baltic Place, Croton-on-Hudson, New York. All of our sponsors are linked up on our Facebook page. And now, back to our episode.
Hello and welcome to our special UnFather's Day podcast. I'm Peaceful Nick, the medium. I'm an evidential medium specializing in helping people start or continue their healing journey from the loss of a loved one.
And I am Lady Shadowe, playwright, author, teacher, speaker, artist, tarot card designer, tarot card reader, psychic empath, paranormal investigator, and so much more. So happy to be here with you, Nick, and our audience today.
We will be talking about parenting, the good, the I'm okay, I swear, the God help me moments, I'm gonna lose it. So you may have noticed at the beginning of the podcast, I said the special UnFather's Day podcast. And there's a reason for that, which we will get to. But Lady Shadowe, what are your plans for Father's Day weekend?
Thank you so much for asking, Nick. Well, I was going to make a joke about my husband screening his calls on Father's Day, but we are childless by choice. We are very responsible lovers. And so we will be celebrating with other fathers. We will be celebrating with other family members. We will be celebrating with our fur babies, proud parents of a cat, a dog, and a horse. And we'll just be doing our standard barbecue, dipping in the pool, and chilling in the hot tub. How about you, Nick?
My Father's Day weekend, I am so happy to report I have my oldest son and his wife have a 2-month-old baby, and my husband and I are going to visit him for his first Father's Day weekend in Savannah, Georgia, and we are so excited. And the baby just started rolling over today, and we could not be more thrilled to spend the weekend with our son for his first Father's Day.
That sounds absolutely divine. And if you're into Father's Day, which most of us are, and you're honoring someone that you love and who loves you back, a new father like your son, how exciting. No better way to do that. I wish I had a father around still to celebrate, because I think that would be spectacular. My husband's father has also passed, so we have to celebrate in spirit, but that is quite okay.
And I have not had a Father's Day with my own father since 1986 or 1987.
Oh, wow. Yeah. And I would say same for me. I would say 2017 was probably the last time I had any kind of Father's Day action as well. And I mean that in a, you know, I mean that in a traditional, normal sense. But, we keep it real here, right, Nick?
Right, right. I
So
knew.
you and I, yes, we have that in common. I mean, I think when we talked about our first meeting in San Francisco on episode 1, where we actually, in all those hours that we met and spoke, we went over our family situations and we found much in common with each other.
Absolutely. My father is living. He does live across the country. However, even when we lived in close proximity, we didn't spend a lot of time together. I wish things would be different. I think that sometimes different personality types, different backgrounds, different outlooks, all kinds of things contribute to the lack of a healthy relationship. And I actually, for the first time about 3 or 4 months ago, got an apology from my father for his behavior that
Wow.
I deserved that apology.
Absolutely.
After, 50 years, I waited for that apology.
That's awesome. How did that come about? And obviously you accepted, but you did not choose to further your relationship after the apology. And that's, by the way, completely your right and 100% supported, by the way.
Well, first of all, I would not say I'm not continuing my relationship with him. I just rarely speak to him. I'm very, very busy. He's a 3 hour time difference from me. So when I wake up in the morning, it's 5 a.m. for him. So, and then by the time in the evening when I'm free, he's going, he's having dinner or he's going to bed because he goes to bed early. So it's not that I'm not having a relationship with him. I just say it would be not a close relationship. But I actually called him and asked him essentially about some of his transgressions because there was a situation with, I have a family member who's quite ill, and I talk to that family member every single day. And we were trying to get the family together to help this family member financially. Well, I help her myself on my own. I don't need to give my money to my dad to send to this family member. And I told him that. And he said, are you going to be a good person or a bad person? And that triggered me to no end
I do not blame you.
because I was like, after the family history we have of addiction and abuse, and all I'm trying to do is help people. I'm not perfect. I've made lots of mistakes in my life, but I try really hard to do good things. And that triggered me because I have witnessed the things he has done. And I don't know that he knew I remembered them because I saw the things he did. I remember them. And so that really, really, really upset me, as you can imagine. Um, and then I called him a few weeks later and said, listen, I remember this, I remember this, I remember this. And he apologized for the first time in 50 years. And I've
Wow.
confronted him before a few times, and he never really took accountability. And this time, seemingly he did, which was nice. Um, and so it stands kind of up in the air at this point.
Interesting. So he apologized, and then after the apology, he didn't say something like, "Oh, I wish we could stay in touch more," or, "I really miss our closeness. Is there any way that we can arrange to be more communicative?" Anything like that?
No.
And how did that make you feel?
It's not unexpected.
Yeah. But do you wish he had, along with the apology, reached out like an olive branch and said, "Hey, let's like kind of repair this?" And because anybody can say sorry and then walk away again. And it's almost like it negates the apology, right? It's like, I'm your dad, not just your sperm donor. I was there for a lot of your life. I'm still alive. Like, it makes you wonder, right? What clicks in these men's minds that my kid is an adult now, so I can just drop this relationship or pick it up when I want to, and it doesn't have any effect on anyone. And you have 2 children,
Yes.
and I'm sure that your boys at some point would have liked to experience grandpa. And what a shame that that was.
It has been very upsetting on multiple levels. We do not have enough time in this podcast to go through all of that. But you're right, it does kind of negate the apology because I haven't heard from him since then.
Oh my gosh. Well, how long ago was that again?
At least 3 or 4 months.
And I understand that trauma because my dad was in and out of my life even after I made the attempts to locate him when I turned 18. It was kind of a Jerry Springer story, actually. Before I moved to San Francisco, I was in St. Petersburg, Florida, where I was raised until I was 6. And then my dad and my mom moved us out to San Francisco. There began my love for San Francisco. And I remember the crazy fights they had, and they ended up breaking up within that 3-year span. We had moved to Marin County, and that is where the shit kind of hit the fan. My mom took us in the middle of the night. Cops were involved. My dad tried to take my mother's driver's license in the middle of the night so she couldn't get away. Now, it wasn't like knockdown abusive, black and blue, bruising, that kind of abuse, but it was enough pushing and shoving and throwing tuna cans at each other, mostly my mom defending herself. Obviously, she didn't get involved in altercations, but when my mom did finally leave, she picked up and we moved to my uncle's in San Jose, stayed with him for a short stint, and then my mom got an apartment in Santa Clara, which I visited recently, by the way, which brought back so many crazy memories. But I never saw my father again after that. I had heard that he had dropped by gifts for our birthdays and whatnot. Other than that, my mom would just kind of say, when I would inquire about where's dad, she'd say, "I don't know. He is a drunk and he is doing his own thing. And I just need you to know he probably will never come looking for you because he's not that kind of guy. So don't get your hopes up," kind of thing. And at 18 years old, I went back to the college my dad worked at in St. Petersburg, Florida, where we originated this story, where I was born and where my mom and dad met. In fact, the same college that my mom and dad met at, I was going to. And my grandmother told me to go to the admissions office, where one of the women that was still working there after all those years, after my mom and dad had left, and she knew where my father was. So at 18, she gave me an address.
Wow.
I wrote him a letter, and he was like, "Oh my God, I can't believe my daughter found me." Well, even though he could have done the same thing.
Right.
He could
Right.
have taken the time to find me. He chose not to, but he was supposedly thrilled that I reached out, and we built a adult relationship from there. And I have a sister who's, we share DNA. So I shared the information with my sister. We did a couple of visits, which were super fun at the time. But then we noticed that he was still drinking. He was still doing the things that he was kind of doing in a more functioning way when my mom left him. And my attempts over the years to get closer to him were more thwarted in the direction of, okay, I'm understanding where I came from, who I am, because of the personality that I'm getting to know through the miniature communications that we had, phone call here and there. We would meet up once in a while when it's convenient for both of us. He then moved to Southern California. I moved to New York, so it was harder. But it was really just a kind of a phone relationship for a long time.
And as time went on through this phone relationship, sadly, his drug and alcohol abuse increased over the years because, as you know, that's a progressive disease. And in that time, my father was also exploring different relationships, types of relationships, and solidifying his gender preferences. So he was dating men, and he ended up marrying a nice, sweet gentleman who ended up taking care of him until the end. But the two of them together, unfortunately, were using. And so there was always this kind of block in our relationship to be able to fully be honest and deep with each other because of the limitations that the abuse put on he and his partner. Then in 2018, he took his life, and he warned me for many years that this is how he was going to go out. He was going to go out his way or the highway. And he self-diagnosed himself with heart failure because he had received some swelling in his leg and thought, okay, that's it. I'm not going to a hospital. I'm not going to get treatment. I want to go out my way. That's it. I'm done, which I respect. However, I did not receive a phone call. I never received a letter. It was rumored that I was going to receive a letter at some point from his husband, but I never actually received it. So I had to kind of come to my own conclusions using my own closure and my own acceptance and forgiveness on my own without any help from him. And I don't want to assume how he felt when he left, or if he was just over living life, because for the most part, sadly, he really didn't enjoy his life unless he was using. He came from a very wealthy family of super intelligent parents and was very gifted, and he was very intellectual. I just don't think he really found his place in the world. And when he realized he had these talents, but didn't enjoy sharing them with the world, and then covering up his own pain along with the unprocessed trauma that we talk about, the only way for him to get out of this was to stay numb and literally die numb.
So even though your dad is here, you still have a little bit of hope that you can maybe repair that situation before things get to that point. But if you don't, we are here to say to our audience that everyone has a different experience with fathers, and it's not all wine and roses. And when you pop on your social media feed on Father's Day, do not let all of those posts get you down because you don't have a dad that's as great as your best friends. It's okay to be real and talk about what's real in your life. And I am not ashamed to say, hey, this is what happened with my life.
I mean, it's not my fault that I was born into the family that I was, and that my dad probably even had a touch of narcissism. And thank God my mom, even through our tumultuous times, we now have a great relationship, and at least I have her, and she got me through a lot of those times. But we can't live in the past. We have to move forward and just be grateful for the things that we do have today.
So, I mean, we all have these battles that we have to fight, you know?
I like that you mentioned narcissist because I wanted to talk about that. My father, so in my mediumship practice, I have come to believe through my experiences with mediumship and reading books about mediumship and doing thousands and thousands of readings. I understand that we agree before we come to this earth to have certain challenges. So I don't have anger or bitterness or resentment towards my father now. Now I did for a long time, which I think many people do. I think he does have some narcissistic personality traits. I'm not a psychiatrist, but our special guest may be able to help me with this. But I would say he definitely has narcissistic traits. I think there are a lot of boomer generation fathers who leave their families and never think about them again. Or it seems to us, the children of these dads that disappear in the boomer generation, which seems to be pretty common. It seems like they never think about us, they don't care about us, and if we don't contact them, they don't contact us. And that is a thing that bothers me. Like, I can never imagine going years, literal years, and not talking to one of my children. And that happened to me. I went for years. My father did not meet my children until they were teenagers. Never saw them.
Wow.
Oh, no. Oh, excuse me. Let me correct that. Saw them a few times when they were toddlers and then didn't see them again until they were teenagers. No contact, nothing. No phone calls, nothing. So,
That's what I can't comprehend is that I know that the male is not the one that's carrying and bonding with the baby. I get that. And I get that biologically they're built to fly around the world and drop their seed wherever they can and want to. But when you see that human being come out, I have a baby book I was just looking at 2 days ago. And my mom and dad, despite their serious issues at the time, holding, smiling pictures, they seemed so excited to have me. I was the first of three girls on my mom's side, but I think I was the second baby in general for my dad because he had gone through, I think, four marriages by the time, well, four or five by the time
holy
all was said and done.
moly.
And so you think, oh my gosh, look at the bond that was created here. And boy, that dysfunction, when you grow up and you start seeing it, and I was an old soul and you were an old soul, you recognize things right away, I'm sure, in your family dynamic and went, whoa,
And that's
this
why I'm the
doesn't,
black sheep. That
right, me too,
I'm the
me
truth
too.
teller. People don't
Yes,
want to hear the truth. I've been
yes.
telling the truth since my mom died in 1986, and I was shipped from Missouri to San Francisco to live with my dad. And when I would tell the truth about things he didn't realize I knew and remembered, it just made all kinds of problems in the family. And I'm like, but this is what happened. This is what happened. Like he didn't meet my baby sister until she was in first or second grade, and he lived in the same town long enough for 2 or 3 years, never saw her.
It's like even if I had a pet as a child, I used to have horses growing up, as we've discussed, right? And I had a horse that I sold to somebody. I still wanted to know how that horse was doing.
Yep.
I would call up and, oh, how is Jack doing? And I just don't understand how anyone could just leave a child. How can you just walk away and not even think about it or absolve yourself of response? I guess you just shove it down or use substances to like
Well,
numb it out.
and my dad he's been in recovery since 1989, which is wonderful. He did use a lot of different kinds of drugs and alcohol, but through his recovery, it has kept him clean and sober. But I'm not sure how much processing of his previous marriage and children that lived far away and didn't really have contact with that he has done.
And that's the thing. My dad never got to even an inkling of where your dad got to an apology because my dad was using the entirety of his life, one substance or another, or several put together. We're talking heavy medicated all day, 24/7, can't miss a dose for a minute type of heavy sedation. He never felt his feelings. He never became unnumb to anything that was really going on other than surface scratching. How are you doing? Great to hear from you on Father's Day. Great to hear from you Christmas.
No
Love the
depth.
gifts.
No
No
depth.
depth. I'm a playwright, so I've written several plays, all of which have been produced. Half of them have gone on to off Broadway. And he would read some of my scripts, and anything that had a spiritual feel to it, he would say, "Oh, that's
Hooey.
can you take the God out? Can you take the angels out? It would be a great play if you took out everything that wasn't carnal and animal, drug addicted and sexually addicted." And it was fascinating. And I have a thick skin, so it never bothered me when he didn't like something or couldn't connect with my work because my work is always higher level, as you know. But I just thought it was hilarious that everything was just on that really baseline carnal level.
It's interesting because I have friends and family members who refuse to see anything spiritual existing. I have someone I know who believes in ghosts but doesn't believe in God. And I've asked that person, well, what are ghosts? If you don't believe in God, you don't believe in spirits, but you believe in ghosts. So anyway, I
Exactly.
digress. That was a tangent. But I think it's interesting. It's an interesting psychological question. Why are some people so adamantly against a higher power of any kind? And I wonder sometimes if it's pure ego. Is it pure ego that people just say, nothing can exist but me and material? And I know, as everyone knows, I'm a scientist and I'm a medium, and I go to conferences and speak to scientists regularly. And some of them are it's called materialism. if you can't touch it, feel it, and see it, it's not real. And then came along quantum physics, and that's a whole other story for another episode. Um, but I saw a priest talking to Neil deGrasse Tyson one time, and they were talking about, spirituality because Neil deGrasse Tyson's an atheist, and they were talking about science, and the priest asked him about something like quantum physics, and he goes, "It's a mystery." And the priest goes, "It's a mystery you believe in."
Amen.
There's no difference between scientific dogma and religious dogma, right? There
Right.
are things we believe in that we can't see or touch.
That's
And
right.
so we need to all come to an understanding that there's a lot out there.
And I know that there are a lot of people who are in recovery, who call their God whatever they want, whatever their higher power, and we are all for that. Whatever higher power you want to address, a doorknob, a cloud, a planet, the Buddha, whatever higher power, higher energy. But you're right. But overall, the ego eases God out.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
And so
Yep.
when we can connect with something, when you're connecting with your higher self, that's technically you're connecting with your God, your creator. And again, none of us can define exactly what that is because we all have different experiences and this is completely subjective. But it does help to think deeper. And for me and you, we have been very spiritual beings since a young age. And you and I probably always look to our parents to A, do the right ethical thing, and B, to be that spiritual kind of guider. And we didn't have that. So we had to
Right.
just kind of guide ourselves along. And that's a good thing in a way because we had to fend for ourselves and fight for our higher selves to become better and become more in our lives. But let's talk to the audience about the one big thing we also have in common. You and I have been married to one person. We've never been divorced, right? And you had a wedding. I had a wedding, separate times. And what's the one denominator that we can also share about our weddings?
My father did not come to my wedding. My uncle had to give me away. And my mother was passed away. So my mom's best friend stood in her place. So I had no parents at my wedding. And my father said he was too busy working. When he owned his own business for many, many years and easily could have, in my opinion, he had plenty of notice, he could have been there. And then my son got married 3 years ago, and my father was invited, and I thought, oh, this is a way he can make it up. Didn't come.
Yeah.
Didn't come. It's too far, which is
Same with me.
It's just across the country.
Isn't it interesting how some people make certain things priorities over others? It was the same with my father. My father and his husband at the time, same thing. I gave everybody a year and 2 months of notice. I said, this is where I'm doing it. I'm doing it in Gettysburg. We had a whole themed Civil War wedding. It was absolutely amazing. So one of a kind. We scraped and clawed to have a band and to do a full on wedding that nobody in our family could ever afford to do. It was a themed wedding. It was a destination wedding. It was so exciting and so well thought out. And I'm a creative person being a theater producer. So I had so many cool details. We rented a horse so that people could pose with and on the horse in their preferred Civil War attire that was requested as the dress. And it was fabulous. And people who we thought would never show up, especially on my husband's side, who were way more conservative Catholics, all showed up and participated. And my dad was like, I can't ask my husband to give up his Christmas party for his employees that he manages.
He said to me, I'm sorry, daughter. I know that you're 1 out of 5 of my kids and you're the only one talking to me. I can't ask my husband to not have his party this year. I just can't ask him to do that, even though you're getting married once in a lifetime to somebody I like. I support your union and all, but I just can't be there. It's a lot to travel to Pennsylvania from California, and you know how I like to go first class, and I need to be lying down, and I don't do cars, and I don't do long train rides. Oh, I heard the gamut of excuses. And he wasn't the only family member that gave me the same excuses why they could not be there. But hey, again, let them. What can I do? What could I have done? I tried everything. I moved on. I enjoy remembering that day. My husband and I, it was quite the feat, quite amazing. And to this day, our wedding is the one that everyone talks about, including on Chris's side, my husband, who again is strict Catholic, and they are not used to these types of weddings. And they fought us as well on the theme and the fact that it was not in a church. And we eventually said, no, we're doing it our way and you can come or not. And they all came, except for a few important people on my side. But I will say that my 87-year-old grandmother walked me down the aisle, and that was worth everything in gold because she was one of the closest people to me. Lord rest her soul now. And it was a magical day.
I'm sorry that happened to you as well, Nick, because that was wrong.
Well, and we have that in common. We are similar in the way that, you know what? Let people show you who they are. And if they wanted to, they would.
Yeah.
And that's just how I'm living my life now. I have no ill will. I have no anger. I have no resentment. I understand who my father is and what his priorities are. And I am not on that list.
Yep.
That is sad, but I look at it as I have a husband of 30 years almost and two grown adult sons. My husband was an excellent dad. Now, we can talk about marriage problems in another episode, but he was an excellent dad. He spent time with his kids. He played with his kids. He took his kids everywhere. He still wants only to just go do stuff with his kids as much as he can because he loves them and he wants to spend time with his kids. And I told him once or twice or 10 times, I said, I wouldn't change having a better father for losing having a good father to my kids because I don't know a single person who has a very close, good relationship with their dad and a very good, close relationship with their husband. Now, that person may exist, but I don't know anybody like that. And I would much rather, if I had to choose, have a good husband who is a good dad to my kids because those are my kids and they're more important to me than anybody, you know. And so that heals that part of me that is wounded from not having a dad consistently and healthily, emotionally present in my life.
I'm so glad to hear that, and I know that about you. And you have filled that hole 4 times over with all the amazing things that you do, just as I have. And I have channeled a lot of my resentment and pain from childhood into my art and into my plays. I mean, if anyone has come to New York to see one of my plays, it's all about relationships and healing yourself and facing your fears, being honest with the people in your life, and like you deciding, I'm not taking responsibility for somebody else's actions. I'm
Yes,
going to accept them and move on with my own life and my own actions and choices and create a happy, beautiful life no matter what hand I was dealt. That is the ultimate perfect end of the story.
exactly.
As two daughters of someone who has not made us a priority, we've made a priority for ourselves, and
Yes.
I value that so much more.
Yes, absolutely. And even though we don't have fathers present in our life at all, we do have a parent here, and that is Mary Ray. I am very happy to welcome Mary Ray. She brings many years of holistic mind, body, spirit perspectives to her clients and students, which has been derived from her education and experience as an addictions counselor, retired, registered nurse, retired, artist, writer, and an active ordained metaphysical minister. She holds a PhD in counseling psychology, a master's degree in health education, a bachelor's degree in psychology and sociology, and an associate's degree in nursing. She has also completed advanced training in hypnosis, natural biofeedback for self-realization, art and writing for spiritual development, and compassion-based stress management. She has written 3 novels, markets her artwork, and she is currently completing a guide for spirit-based interpersonal communication. She has been a teacher of A Course in Miracles for over 20 years, and she believes that everyone can experience the miracle of love, peace, and happiness in everyday life. Email Mary for free 20-minute consultation, spiritmary@gmail.com. All of this information and all of this will be linked in the show notes below. Welcome, Mary. I'm so happy you're here.
I'm honored to be here talking to you and to Lady Shadowe. You guys are amazing. I've been listening to your podcasts and they are so enlightening and so, well, holistic. And that's kind of my shtick. I'm a little bit of a mind body person also
I,
as well.
I love to hear that. And right before you joined, we were talking about our fathers because this is the Father's Day weekend special, the Father's Day podcast. And Lady Shadowe mentioned ego, easing God out. And I remembered her telling me that you are a student of A Course in Miracles. And a teacher of A Course in Miracles, can you tell us about that journey and how you implement that in your professional life?
It's been a wonderful experience for me. It was a life-saving, life-changing experience, of course. I think the first thing to talk about with the course is that it's channeled material, and so that tends to raise eyebrows. You know, people say, "Well, what's the core? Who was the author of this book that has no author?" But clearly, when you read the course, it talks about Jesus's life and his experience, and he, in some ways, reinterprets some of the biblical references to Jesus' life. And as a fallen away Catholic at that time in my life, collapse of another relationship, I kind of reached out to the group that was at my New Thought church and discovered this. I couldn't put it down once I started to read it. There are a lot of people who have told me since then that they have difficulty reading the text. The text is quite lengthy. It was taken down by a psychologist at from a university in New York. She was a PhD psychologist. And so the terms are kind of psychological, which appealed to me because at that time I was a psych nurse
Mhm.
and moving into the counseling field.
I also had the text based on Lady Shadowe's recommendation many years ago, and I found it hard to read
Yes.
myself. However, I have read many other books that have stemmed from the ideas in A Course in Miracles. So I'm very familiar with it. But to those who are not familiar with A Course in Miracles, can you just give a brief explanation of what it is?
It's actually three books in one, and the first book is the text, which explains things in narrative text about how to find love in your life and forgive people for perceived transgressions. The
Mm,
middle part, though, is the part that is appealing to a lot of people because it's 365 lessons. So every day you do a lesson, and it's a course in what it described itself as. This is a course in mind training.
mm,
It's to train your mind away from, as you were saying earlier, the ego, the voice of the ego. We have two voices. It's almost like two speakers on each shoulder, right? One speaker on each shoulder. And one speaker is saying, get even. This is not fair. You're mean to me. I've been wounded. And then the other side says, forgive and realize people are doing the best they can with what they know at the time. So we always have this choice of which to listen to, the KEGO or the KGOD is what he used to call it. So I think that's probably the simplest way to look at it. The third book then is just, they call it the Manual for Teachers, and it's some specific direction about how to teach. It's not to be proselytized or to become a religion. The course is designed for people to go through this 1 year's worth of lessons and then move on to bring the message to the world in your own life.
That is wonderful. I don't remember because it's been so long that that's how it was set up. But I do know that in A New Earth by Eckhart Tolle, which I'm sure he has probably studied this book as Course in Miracles as well, because he talks about the ego and the pain body, and then the part of us that's supposed to be pure love, our spirit, our soul, our source. And so it's a very similar concept. I
Yes.
just think it's wonderful that we have access to these tools. Everyone has access now with the internet. We have access to, you could probably get them all for free on audiobook somewhere. So if you don't like to read, these things are good for humanity, and we need to raise the vibration of humanity as much as possible. Amazing. Now, I do want to get to something a little tiny bit off topic, but it's very important. You are the wonderful mother of the amazing Lady Shadowe, and I want to know how it was parenting Lady Shadowe, because I know she is a very independent minded person and was probably like that since birth.
Oh, you've got that. You're right on about that. Yes. She's a brilliant, wonderful child. She was as a child. She was my first child. So, of course, I was learning how to be a mother the whole way of her, existence. She was my prototype, right?
Right.
I had two children after her, and things got a little easier for me because I understood the process. I remember them holding up a baby, my first child, in the delivery room, and I was such, you just don't know what you're in for, right? And they
Mhm.
held her up, and I said, "Oh, it's a baby."
Right.
If you can believe that. I mean, that's how naive I was. And of course, inexperience, you just have no idea what parenting is going to be like until you're there.
I'm so glad you said exactly that, because I wanted children for a very long time. I have a very big Italian Catholic family, babies being born all the time. And when my first son was born, I brought him home, and 3 days later, I'm holding him and holding him and holding him and looking at him. You know how you do, you're like in awe of this brand new baby. And I remember a light bulb went off in my head, and I thought, oh my gosh, he's going to be here forever. Like, I have to keep him alive 24 hours a day. I have
Yeah,
to, something, you know, but it doesn't hit you until you're in it. And I think this is something we don't talk about enough, how hard being a new parent is. Nowadays, fathers, like my son just had his first baby with his wife a couple months ago, and fathers are much more involved. But when I had my kids, my husband's father wasn't involved. So my husband had to learn everything. At least I had been around lots of babies, but I don't think people understand how difficult it is to be a parent unless you do it and until you're in
absolutely.
it. And then when people say, "Oh, you're just complaining, it's not that bad." It's like, it's that bad. It's really hard. And then what happened? Like, how was she?
She was, of course, very precocious, as you might imagine. I have a picture of my mother holding her in her lap, and she was not even 6 months old, probably less, a little bit younger, 5 months. And she was standing. She was
Wow.
so strong. She was very physically energetic, as well as very emotionally and mentally sharp. By the time she was going to enter school, and she tested as gifted and talented. And so
Mm.
I enrolled her in a program at the local university where her dad worked. And she was in the gifted and talented program for the summer before she entered school. So early on, she was you could see the intellect, and also an extrovert. She was not an introvert, as you might.
No, that surprises me. I would have never
So
guessed that. I love hearing the parent perspective. of someone I've known for so long. It's so fascinating. What would you say was the most challenging aspect for you in your adult relationship with Lady Shadow?
As most parents find, you, as a parent, your relationship with the child clearly changes. It changes from child to parent relationship to some sort of, I don't know, it's hard to say. It's not exactly peer to peer because you always seem to have this, with my own mother, I can feel it, that always had this, you're in some sort of a child role. The percentage drops, as you get more of an adult percentage and less of a child percentage. I guess that assertiveness, accepting, she was, like I say, my first child. So she was the first to leave home. She was the first to start on her own. She was very independent and seemed to be committed to her just starting her life the way she wanted to do it. Certainly not in the traditional way, although she did finish her classes and she did go on to take college courses and training in the theater area. And clearly that's where she was headed. And it's up to a parent to accept that.
Right.
And of course, you always worry. You worry, oh, is this, gonna, especially children who move into the arts. That's a very difficult way. I have a grandson now. He was on your show just recently that he's finished his degree in film, but he'd rather wait tables than take a traditional 9 to 5 job. He wants to work in his field and he's doing that. So the challenge for a parent is to accept that and to be supportive and yet kind of deal with your own fears and concern,
Do I
about
get
their
to answer the
welfare.
same question, Nick?
You
I would
may,
love
this
to.
is your podcast. You may answer that question. Lady Shadow, what was the biggest challenge of having Mary Ray as your mother?
Yeah, I mean, I think she summed it up that I was hell bent on being a little entrepreneur since I was very young. And I think that my mother left out the Horse Talk magazine phase, which kind of sealed the deal as who I was going to become, an entrepreneur. I loved office supplies more than toys. I kept my room immaculate. I treated it like an office half the time. I think overall, my commitment to myself was so authentic and knowing what my talents were super young, which was writing, being, like you said, an extrovert and creating things, leading people, being authentic to what brought me joy and passion, as far as whether it was hobbies or classes that I took to teach me how to back end business deliver the arts to the world. So I was always a practical kid, but super creative. So I have that business creative balance, but I always knew this very young. And when I was living in Florida with my grandmother for a stint, I used to make these talking tapes. Some of them pretending I was on a radio station, and here we are podcasting, which is really ironic. But I would have a talking diary on the side of that and talk about my dreams and the things I wanted to do. And it's funny, when I go back and listen to those, I actually am fulfilling all of the things I talked about. I said I wanted to live in a big city. I wanted to do art and write and produce, be on the radio, be in theater, be an actress, a little of everything. And it's so funny that I'm actually doing it. But I think back to the question of my biggest hurdle
Moving into this adult parent relationship was one that I was also the truth teller of the family, like you were, Nicole. And sometimes that didn't bode well when your parents come to you and say, we want you to do this. And I'm saying, but that doesn't feel authentic, or that doesn't make sense, or wait, I see hypocrisy. You're telling me to do this, but you all are doing that, when you're the child and the parents are supposed to be steering the ship. So I had a very strong sense of who I was and what the world should kind of look like at an early age. I guess we would call that an old soul at this point, which goes along with knowing exactly what I wanted to do, even as a child, into adulthood. So I had these dreams and I put them together, and I lived my life since probably 17 years old, working toward those dreams. I bypassed the get pregnant on accident phase. I bypassed the get drunk and drive and get yourself into trouble phase. I jumped past getting married to the wrong guy in my 20s. Never did that. I jumped straight into, okay, I'm going to leave the house, go to college, move to a big city, be a writer, become an actress, become a producer, all while being spiritual and learning about myself and learning the tarot cards, which I did in my early 20s, and kind of balancing all these cool, fun, creative things that I wanted to do with my life. And I look back now and I'm so glad that I made all those decisions because I don't have a single regret. And I also consider myself, though I'm very close to Broadway, and it's not a matter of if, it's when we get one of my 17 plays onto Broadway, I feel like I've already made it. I actually make a living as an artist. I pay myself a salary to be an artist. And nobody trained me how to do that. Nobody held my hand through it. I came to New York. I was dropped here with 22 cents with my beat up car after having made it across the country from the West Coast with a broken down boyfriend, literally. And I started from scratch like Madonna. And I built this theater production company with what I learned in high school, what I learned in college, no formal degrees, no formal investors or grants. Just literally self-made, self-built, self-taught. Almost every single job I do right now, between marketing and putting people in my seats and making posters for the show and processing tickets and writing the shows and negotiating contracts and licensing and managing actors, all self-taught by sheer will and passion. So I set out to do something and made a successful living doing it. And I feel like I've kind of showed everybody I had this dream and I did it, and you didn't have to worry about me, Ma, because, I made myself a way. I'm still doing it. I'm so happy to be doing it. And no one ever had to worry about me. And I think my mother would agree that as she raised me, she probably learned with my independence and my very strong and stubborn personality to fully trust in the fact that I could do exactly what I set out to do and successfully. And I have that now. And I've proven that not just to myself, but to the world. And my family understands it. This is what I do for a living. And they understand it and they're supportive of it most of the time. And it's really nice that I'm a walking example of, yes, an artist can make a living as a career artist. And I think that most parents want that 8 to 5, that security, that stability, that 401k for their kid, that home ownership, which eludes me still because I make enough to support myself. I make enough for the next project. I do not have $500,000 to buy my first home yet. I just don't. I want to buy it with cash one day when I hit Broadway. So that's the goal. I don't get to drive a new car every year because I get a car and I happily drive it into the ground. I've always wanted a washer and dryer in my house where I live. That's something that also eludes me. But I do make enough money to travel internationally a few times a year. I have a horse. I like to spend my money on experiences, not things. And most of all, I get to spend 40 to 80 hours a week doing work that I love that doesn't feel like work ever. And so few people can get past that barrier and say, hey, trust me, I got this. And my mom and my sisters and my dad at the time and my grandma at the time, Lord rest their souls, had to also trust. But then they saw that I was doing it and that I did it, and they were all very proud. So I feel like no one has to worry anymore. My mom now can sit back and say, I did a great job with her because she's doing what she loves. She never got into drugs. She never got into crime. She didn't marry the wrong person. She didn't get into really bad friendship groups. And she had the street sense to say, hey, I'm going to take care of myself to the best of my ability and trust that. And that is an ode to my mom as well, how well she raised me, because I think she knew early on that she could trust me to make these very independent decisions and trusted my judgment even as a young child. And I'd like to shout out to my mom for that as well. I mean, she used to let me run around with my boyfriends and had total trust that after sitting down with me at 6 years old and explaining the birds and the bees that I would not get myself pregnant or get myself in a situation that would be unwise. She somehow knew that I could take care of myself even when I was 13, 14, 15. And that to me was the most valuable thing that I pulled from the adult relationship. And now as we relate and have a relationship moving forward, we just make the best effort we can to understand each other and who we are, even though we are two different people now in a lot of ways. But I respect my mom's life, and I know she respects mine, and we just kind of come together and appreciate the things that we do have in common and the history that we've shared. My dad was a mess, right? We made it out of that, and look at us on the other side. I've worked very hard to be where I'm at, and I'm proud of every step of the way.
I appreciate you saying that, and I'll let you respond if you like, Mary, but I just want to say it's not just because you're an artist. I have the same issue with my family now that I'm a medium. They were, they always thought I was weird because I was a scientist. Like I loved science. They used to call me Mrs. Spock when I was little because, I loved science. And then I had, a job from the time I was 14. I worked outside of the home, except for a short period of time when my boys were little. But other than that, I worked from 14 to 54 outside of the home. And now I work from home, even though I have a science job still, but I work from home and I'm my mediumship. And, you still get the side eye, and it's like, am I asking anybody to pay my bills? No, I'm doing just fine. Thank you. But people who are uncomfortable, sometimes they're worried, sometimes they're uncomfortable. And so they don't know how to express that in the way that makes us comfortable, I guess is the right way to say it. Mary, do you have anything to say before we move on to the next thing?
I know that everyone says it, but I can't think of a better way to say it, in that communication is the key. And not just speaking. Most people, when you say the word communication, they think, well, I have to say this right? They have to say, well, I have to just word that right. But only 50% of communication is actually speaking. The other half is listening. And the ability to actively listen to another person that you disagree with, or a child, for example, is a skill that most of us are not taught. And I think, again, the studying with the course has helped me heal lots of things over the years. We're all on a journey. We're all on our different paths, and appreciate that we all have gifts, and not everyone, of course, realizes all their gifts and can demonstrate them, at each stage of our lives. We're working on it, and that's to have that kind of compassion toward ourselves and others is, to me, the key to living a peaceful existence. Otherwise, it's recrimination and shoulds and oughts, and you can't go back in time. You can only work on the present time, at least now. I mean, at some point, maybe we'll be able to go back in time. One neat thing about the course that I got to plug in for that is it said that time is like a carpet in a way where it rolls forward. But if you do the forgiveness work and you do the letting go of the past work, you actually can pave a better future for yourself. And that's the neatest. It's that you can actually fix things that have happened in the past, which is a kind of a different slant on time. We can actually heal the past with what we're doing in the present. And that the idea of that gives me hope. Otherwise, it's like all the things I've ever done in the past are going to haunt me forever, right? And I don't believe that anymore.
Right. And it's similar to The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. It's about
Very much,
being
yeah.
in the present moment and not ruminating on the past. That, we can't change it. We can only address it appropriately depending on the situation. Thank you for all of that information. That's wonderful. You
Sure.
have a book, Mary, that is called Tell the Devil to Go to Hell. And is that related to your stint in Catholicism? I myself am a recovering Catholic. And is that related to your experiences with Catholicism, or is that something totally separate?
Absolutely true. Absolutely related. When you're raised Catholic, as you know, you're told that these are the truths and there's no wiggle room, right? I was raised in Florida and around a lot of Protestant people. We're the only Polish Catholic people in the neighborhood, or in my school that I knew of. We were very lily white neighborhood, so going to church was kind of foreign to all my friends, and my parents were very strict Catholics. So we were told that my friends, too bad, they're going to go to hell because they're not Catholic. Catholic is the way to heaven and that's it, right? You know what that's like.
Yeah.
So when I decided in my late teens that Catholicism was not for me, and it was during the 70s and the times of the revolution and women's rights and stuff. And I
When
had,
we used to have women's rights.
yeah, yes, right. Exactly. I had a female child and I looked at that little child and I thought, wait a minute, I can't burden her with all these kind of ideas. So that was one of the times when I felt like I actually sacrificed myself, thinking that, well, I'm probably going to go to hell because I'm not raising my child in the right way. And I've rejected the Catholic traditions and teachings, and so I'm probably going to go to hell. I said, I can't do this to this little girl. And then my next child, 14 months later, came along. And I said, oh, I got two little girls. I said, I can't, they can't. Back then, there was, no birth control, no abortions, no this, no that, no divorce, nothing. And it really weighed heavily on me. It really affected me a lot. So that book was written pretty early on in my spiritual journey, kind of call it a guided reflection, because I make a statement about what I believed at the time or was taught about the devil and hell, and then I ask the reader to do the same reflection and just think about it. Does it really make sense to you? And that kind of thing. And things have changed quite a bit since then, but I feel like the process is still valid. And I think that the book is a pretty nice guided reflection on just to find out, what are your beliefs? What do you believe in? Because I think if we don't look at that, those ideas kind of are pushed aside and they lurk in the background.
Yeah. Yes. And I think the resurgence of evangelical Christianity in this country, which is
Mhm.
taking away women's rights left and right.
Yeah,
I personally, even though I grew up Catholic, the devil never made sense to me, even though, we were told if you masturbate, you're going to go blind. That kind of thing. So when I was like 13, 14, I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to wake up blind tomorrow. You know, so
yeah. We used to say it. We used to tell that priest in confession.
yeah,
You know,
yeah. And which is also very weird. That we could just do a
extremely
whole
weird.
religious dogma episode. I definitely want to do that for
Definitely.
sure. But the dogma of religions, including Catholicism and evangelical Christianity and all of the other super fundamentalist Christian groups that scar people. I know a couple who the woman was 27. She was a virgin. She grew up in a very strict religious organization. And when she got married, she was told you have to be a virgin. Oh my God, sex is bad, sex is bad, sex is bad, sex is bad. And you get married in a piece of paper overnight. Now you're supposed to just have sex and everything's supposed to be great. Well, at
Right.
27 years old, you've never had sex, you've never been touched. And now all of a sudden, you're just supposed to turn on this sexual revolution for yourself. You're scarred. People like that are scarred. And I think it's so dangerous to
I
teach
agree.
people these strict abstinence rules. I'm not saying people need to go around being sluts and everybody needs to go have sex. And don't get me started on the double standard between men and women
Oh
and
yeah.
having
Yeah.
sex. That's a whole other story.
Oh,
I just
absolutely.
think this religious dogma has harmed humanity much more than it has helped.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you. Yeah, that's why we think 50% of marriages don't make it or more now, I think.
We talked about that last week, the
Yeah,
Sacred Sex podcast, about how we need to reclaim our authentic sexuality,
Yeah.
our authentic sacred selves. And there's a way to combine that as well in a wonderful, healthy, enlightening way, which is what I think our creators intended in the first place.
Yeah. Well, but that's not what we were taught,
right.
especially those of us that are, of course, older. But yeah, that kind of inhibitions tend to be passed on to children, of course.
Yes,
And no one ever talks about it, of course, becomes a taboo subject, and taboo subjects tend to fester and cause all sorts of kind of neurotic behaviors, I think.
And that's
absolutely.
why we, black sheeps, Nick and I, we have not allowed that to fester, which is why we talk about these things now. because our whole podcast is about unleashing the truth within all of us and healing that, because we all come from some kind of trauma, whether it's Catholicism or another religion or non-religion. We all come with some kind of baggage that has to be healed, and there's so much sexual guilt. At the same time, nowadays it's the over sexualizing.
When I was raising my boys, I thought to myself, what happened to me to cause me to be crazy? So I'm going to do the opposite of that. And one of those things was, the lore about unhealthy information about sex. You should be abstinent. If you aren't a virgin, you're a whore, that kind of stuff. So I taught my boys masturbation was fine. Just make sure you do it in the shower and clean up after yourself. I taught them when they want to have sex, they need to protect themselves because if they get someone pregnant, they are going to work and take care of that baby. If she chooses to have it, which in that day, in that state, they could have an abortion. That's not true everywhere anymore. And so I told them all about different drugs and I read books about different religions. I just gave them a bunch of different information about everything as much as I could to let them make choices for themselves so they weren't feeling this guilt and horrible, terrible feelings. And I am happy to say neither of my boys drink or do drugs. They are both in long-term relationships of, I think, 8 years or more, 8 or 9 years, both of them. They're adults and they have healthy, seemingly healthy relationships as far as I know. And I couldn't be happier. They're doing well and my job is done.
I'm in awe of how you did that. What about your husband?
He grew up Baptist. Talk about some crazy beliefs, but he is also the black sheep of his family.
Oh.
So he left the Baptist church and became a Catholic, and his mother said, "You're gonna kill me. That's the devil's work." Literally, that's what she told him.
Yeah.
But it didn't stop him because he's going to do what he wants. And and he also was very open and honest with our boys. He's a very good dad. I mentioned that earlier tonight. He spent tons of time with them. We still spend time with our boys as much as humanly possible. My husband wasn't allowed to express himself. I think a lot of boys that grew up in his age range were not allowed to be expressive of their feelings. Rub some dirt on it. Big boys don't cry. And then my husband became an alcoholic. He's been sober for 26 years. But because he had to suppress those feelings, because he was taught to suppress everything, he didn't know what to do with it. So he became an alcoholic. And I taught my boys, because my dad's an alcoholic in recovery. My mom was an alcoholic who died at 40, and I married an alcoholic. So I taught my boys express your feelings. And sometimes I regret teaching them that because boy, do they.
Well, that's I think the basis of the parent-child, adult-child relationship now going forward in general. And even with your friendships, right? Like everyone has their own subjective truth, and we need to honor what that truth is.
Yes.
Now, some of us are more authentic than others. Some of us can mask that authentic self and not necessarily be truthful or live truthfully, but we will find our tribe. And when we engage in our relationships, and like you and I keeping our relationship intact all these years, and the fact that, I have a relationship with my mother where even if my father were still here, would I still be in a relationship with him? I'm not sure. Though we are also living in our own subjective truths, sometimes that can cause friction because two truths don't always make
Another truth.
satisfying relationship.
Yeah, I think you brought up a couple of good points. Addiction doesn't just have to be drugs and alcohol, and that's what I've learned. I believe honestly that people can be addicted to anything.
Yes, I agree.
Anything
100%.
anything a human being can do can be addictive, including certain types of relationships.
Yes.
There's
Trauma
you name it. I
bonds.
mean, trauma, self-pity. You can be addicted to gambling, to shopping. I've worked with so many people with food addiction. I worked with the one gambling addiction treatment center that existed west of the Mississippi at one time in Las Vegas. And I learned to expand my idea. My dad also was alcoholic, and codependency is an addiction. It's an addiction to controlling an outcome and
Yes.
controlling other people. And I definitely spent many hours in chairs of adult children of alcoholics and Al-Anon trying to deal with my own, abilities. There's a startling statistic that over 80% of nurses are not only children of alcoholics, but firstborn children of alcoholics. And that's pretty,
Fascinating.
isn't that fascinating? So, and I was, of course, the classic firstborn child of an alcoholic. And I became a nurse. I had no idea why, because like I always wanted to be a writer and a teacher. That was my goal as a child. But it all went out the window when I was married to my first husband, who wanted to live in the West in San Francisco. And he said, you can either be a nurse or a secretary, but that's what we're doing. And this is the only place you can get training. And I just I was 20 and he was 13 years older than me. And I said, okay, I'll do whatever you tell me. And I went to nursing school. And my mother was shocked. She never could get over that. She goes, you a nurse? You don't even like the sight of blood. So it was very odd, of course, that I was very glad to go down that path because it led me to the addictions path because I worked in psych nursing and then I, became a counselor myself. But the addiction model does work. You can be addicted to reading, to religion, to
Any
not going to
escape,
religion. Yeah.
anything to
And
escape.
what is addiction? It's the three C's: the compulsivity, the thoughts that stay with us, the behaviors that we do over and over, and the mindset. I need this, right? I need to do X, Y, Z. I can't do anything else because this is the way I am. So what I've learned over the years, the 12-step programs had taught me that you don't just get over an addiction, you replace it with the thoughts of the higher
Yes.
power, with your higher power, with the inner forgiveness, the inner acceptance, the inner compassion that then spills out to other people. So it's all about, we're all in this together, trying to figure out life and move on and develop ourselves spiritually, express ourselves, and to realize that we are not this body. And I think that's
Yes.
the final thing I'd like to say about the Course in Miracles that people really can't accept. And this is why it's not for everyone, because the Course says we're not this body. In fact, it says this world isn't real. We're here in a movie, kind of
Yep.
entertaining
Yep.
ourselves,
Yep.
like the Matrix, right?
Yep.
And so, whatever path we choose, enjoy it. But it's not the path. It's not who we are. It's just what we're doing or think we're doing. We're in a dream state. Whatever happened
Right.
in my body life meant nothing. I mean, this
Yes.
is wow, this is great. This is real. This life is what's the movie. So
Exactly.
again, to tie ourselves to what we accomplished or didn't do in this lifetime is kind of just doing a disservice.
The other disservice, I think, too, is the addictions, back to the addictions. I think that's all to keep us from our higher purpose. It's distractions,
Oh,
or
sure.
like Nick said, it's the trauma that keeps us from moving forward into being more of service,
Yeah.
to figuring out where our place is authentically in this dream state so that we can ascend and help others ascend more
Yeah.
quickly, more efficiently, and get through life not with the idea that what can distract me next. So I'll put down the food, but I'll pick up the slot machine. I'll put down the slot machine and pick up some pot. If we understand that the root of the addiction is simply hiding from ourselves and our purpose, because once we find that purpose, none of that even exists anymore. Like you said, you ascend because you have found your purpose and you found the peace of the creator and your higher self. You no longer need those things. You just want to serve your higher self.
Right.
And to continue on the addiction subject, Eckhart Tolle says, addiction is the failure to face and move through your pain. And
Your
I have
pain.
that
Yep.
memorized because I come from a family of addicts. I married an addict. I have so much experience with addiction in my life.
Yep.
And when I am going through pain and trauma or just a bad day, sometimes I just like to do artwork. I meditate, I do artwork, and it helps ease my mind's busyness and
Right.
helps get me in the present moment. And I know that it can be very therapeutic for me, and I hope others find healthy ways to deal with their busy mind or their ruminations. And I know that Mary Ray, you are a wonderful artist, and I know you sell lots and lots of art. Can you tell me about your artwork and why you do artwork? Is it meditative for you? Is it healing for you? And what medium of art do you use?
Well, thank you for the kind words. I do have to check myself to make sure it's not an addiction for me, because addiction is, again, we talked about, a compulsive kind of thing. And it's like something we use to escape. We have feelings that are uncomfortable. I did notice for the last month, my husband and I were volunteering at a campground as camp hosts in Oregon. And I didn't paint or the whole time pretty much. And I was wondering, well, am I going to go through withdrawal? Because that's again one of the hallmarks of addiction is if you don't have it, you're going to crave it, right? It's fun to get back with it to because we're back home now, but I did not have the craving. So like, oh man, I wish I had my paintings here so I could get some of this frustration out, because every day brings some sort of frustration. And it was actually a good time to work on my meditations, but I do like to work in acrylics. I had one of my husbands taught me how to paint. Although my sister gave me paints way back when my kids were babies. One day she just brought it over. She goes, "I know you like to paint, and I know you're kind of home with the kids. And how about doing some painting? Here's some materials." I would never have bought those myself. So again, I was grateful for the fact that she was able to kind of see that in me and be that kind. And so I checked a book out of the library, and I found a Sisley that I liked, and I was able to paint. I still have that one. It's probably 11 by 14. It's a pretty good replica of the Sisley, and I just started in one corner. And to this day, I don't even know how I did that with two little kids at home. They were both under 2 or under 3.
We
But
were too busy coloring the walls and writing on the couch. So thank God we didn't mess with my mother's canvases, but we we took the red marker to a white couch once. I remember that.
they had each other. Then we used to dress them like twins sometimes, and because they were only 14 months apart. But anyway, so I didn't pursue my own interests. At that time, I was busy raising kids and earning a living and going through a divorce from their dad, my first husband, my college professor.
Oh yeah, we covered all of that wonderful history in the first 30 minutes.
Okay, so you know what it was like. And at that point, I think he was confused about his sexuality. And
Yep, we covered that too.
anyway, that's good. I'm glad you got that out of the way. And so then to going through that, then being on my own, and then marrying another alcoholic who was rescuing me, and I thought at that point, who's going to marry a divorced mom with 2 young children, but he was nice enough to take us on. And so I didn't paint until I met my third husband, who had his own addiction problems.
I was just gonna say, is he an alcoholic?
He was an actual bona fide artist with other addictions we won't mention. There's a difference between distractions and balance. And what you do, Nick, when you need to heal, or what I do when I write a play, is definitely not an addiction. It's channeling expressions and emotions from a previous time, a current time, and inspired by characters and people that you meet. But it is important to distinguish between what is balance and what is addiction.
Well,
Absolutely.
if it was an
Absolutely.
addiction, I would never have time for my other 2 jobs.
Exactly.
I wish I had more time to paint. Maybe
All of your walls would be covered and your ceiling too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Mary, it has been an absolute pleasure. I have learned so much from your insight tonight. Thank you so very much. And all of your information and how to get a hold of you, how to buy your art, how to buy your books, everything will be linked in the show notes. Thank you so much. We really appreciate you being here tonight.
Oh, thank you too for being so honest, both of you, and being so hospitable and kind and insightful. I appreciate it. I have learned a lot too. And I really, again, love your work, and I wish you continued success.
Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Ma.
Thank you so much for joining us this episode for the Soul Twin Stars podcast. Find us on our podcast Facebook page for Magical Mondays live at 8:30 p.m. Eastern, where we will help you magically slay your weekdays, and for awesome giveaways. For more information about what other spiritual things Nick and I do and offer, visit peacefulnickthemedium.com. That's Nick with just a K. Or to connect with me, Lady Shadowe, soulsandspirits.com is the place to go. If you want to be a guest on one of our shows, we would absolutely love that. Contact us at soultwinstars@gmail.com. See you next Friday at 6 p.m. on Spotify, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, Apple Music, Facebook, and on YouTube. Sending you all so many blessings. Thank you so much for joining us, and until next time, know that you are all cherished.